Indiana will be likely looking for their sixth head coach since the turn of the century in the year 2000, with news coming out yesterday that likely at the end of the year that Coach Mike Woodson will be stepping away and retiring on his own terms. Where does this leave Indiana? Who should they hire, and why is this the most important hire that they've probably ever had to make? We're going to discuss all that here in today's video. I'm, of course, Josh Burton, owner of Everything College Basketball, and we've talked about Mike Woodson a lot in the last couple years about his IU teams having a lot of talent and underperforming. We kind of speculated at the beginning of the year that if they did not have a good year, that this almost had to be the final year. With news of the coming out yesterday that Woodson is set to retire at the end of the year, it is time for Indiana people, not only in the program, but obviously fans have been looking forward to a potential new hire. Coach Woodson came into college. He had obviously played at Indiana back in the day, an IU legend and an alum, and was hired into the program with zero college head coaching experience. He did coach in the NBA, coached Atlanta Hawks among numerous stops, but coaching at Indiana, we thought that maybe being the former legend that he could get players in, which he has. He's had a little success, but that kind of ended a few years ago when Trace Jackson Davis played at an All-American level, carried them to an NCAA tournament bid, won a game in Dayton, but they've never followed up since, despite having talent. It is time to turn a page for Indiana. As I just mentioned, this will be their sixth head coach hiring since the year 2000. Bob Knight, fired. Mike Davis follows. He goes immediately to a national title game appearance, then follows it up with mediocrity following that. They bring in Kelvin Sampson. He's there at half a season. He gets in trouble by NCAA violations. He is gone. I bet Indiana fans wish that was different. The rules today applied back then because Kelvin Sampson, we're probably having a different conversation. We've seen what he's done when he was at Oklahoma. We've seen now, of course, what he's doing at Houston. That's one I know Indiana fans wish they had back, but nonetheless, Kelvin Sampson, not including Dan Dockage taking over for Sampson the rest of that year, the final couple weeks as interim. We're not counting that. They bring in Tom Crean, who sees some success. It struggled for a while. It was a total rebuild when Tom Crean took over. Fans forgave him for that, as they should have. Completely bare cupboard. He rebuilds Indiana. They have the big-time win over Kentucky that kind of signals at the time being that Indiana maybe is back. They make the NCAA tournament, make the Sweet 16 that year, follow it up. They bring in a top recruiting class paired with some holdovers from that year. They're the number one team pretty much all year in the year 2012, 2013. They're the overall number one seed, and they flame out in the Sweet 16. Crean goes on to win another Big Ten title, makes another Sweet 16, but ultimately he is let go. They bring in Archie Miller. Has some excitement around him, bringing in in-state stud Romeo Langford amongst some other good talent, but the problem is they could never score the basketball. They were good defensively, couldn't really score, especially shoot it in that department. They let go of Archie Miller. Then they bring Mike Woodson in, and now it looks like Mike Woodson's tenure after a couple seasons will be ending, and Indiana's time to turn the page. So we are here today to talk about who should IU, because it is such an important hire. Indiana, as I just talked about, in the last 25 years, has one national title game appearance. They have obviously off that one Final Four, and they've only got two Sweet 16s in the last 25 years. For a program who is historically elite, that is not elite numbers. There's been a lot of down years, a lot of missed NCAA tournaments, and so this next hire has to be the one that gets them back on track. So who should they hire? Should Mike Woodson go through at the end of the year as speculated and reported yesterday? Who should AD Scott Dolson make the hire? We will break this down in tiers. Tier one being, there's three names on this list that I think Indiana has to make a call and say no. For whatever reason, you bug them, you make them say no. And there will be some names that are not on this list that you'll hear from other places, like a Scott Drew. I'm leaving Scott Drew off. I think he is staying in Waco until it's time to retire. He turned down Louisville this last offseason. He turned down Kentucky this last offseason after flirting with both. Basically, it came out that his wife didn't want to move. He didn't necessarily want to be in kind of the the eye of the storm at these big programs like he would be. The same way goes for Indiana in this case. Historic fan base, historic program. Waco, he can kind of be up and down and go hang out if he wants to, not be mobbed. You can't do that at Louisville. You definitely can't do it at Kentucky, and you can't do it at a program like Indiana. So I'm going to throw Scott Drew out. I think he's staying in Waco. To me, there's three names Indiana has to make a call, pester almost, and say no to you. In no particular order, I think Bruce Pearl's got to be on that list. Now, you can say what you want. Would Bruce leave? He has been at Auburn now. This is his 11th year. He's clearly got the number one team in college basketball this year. They've only got one loss. If you look at Bruce's time at Auburn, he's in his 11th year. They have made the NCAA tournament 5 times, including a Final Four run. Had every opportunity to potentially win a national championship, if you recall. Our bad call late against Virginia in that Final Four. Maybe we're talking about Auburn as a national championship team back in 2019. He's made a Final Four, 5 NCAA tournament appearances, has the best team in college basketball this year. Should be 6. They were trending to make the 2020 NCAA tournament. Of course, COVID wiped all that out, but they would have made it. They finished that season with a 25-6 record, so they were definitely going to make the NCAA tournament. So that means he has made in his Auburn 10-year alone the NCAA tournament at least half of the years. This year will make number 6 for sure. And as we said, 2020 would have been another year. So he makes the NCAA tournament more times than he misses it so far at Auburn. You go back to his Tennessee days, he made the NCAA tournament every single year at Tennessee. 2 Sweet 16 appearances, 1 Elite 8 appearance in 2010. And back before that, in the D1 level, he coached 4 seasons at Milwaukee, made the NCAA tournament twice his final year in 2005, led Milwaukee to a Sweet 16 appearance, knocking off 1 seed Kentucky in the process that year. So Bruce can obviously coach. He can recruit at a high level. He is a player's type of coach. He will coach you hard, but he finds a way to blend in talent perfectly. His offense, if you look in since 2017 alone, they're in the top 55 in KenPom and adjusted offense every year. You go back to Tennessee, he had some really high potent offenses at Tennessee as well. He had a top 60 offense in 3 of his 4 years at Milwaukee. His defenses also follow. He has top 50, top 60 type defenses. This year, he's got number 12 so far with Auburn. Last year, the number 6 ranked defense. So he's got the perfect blend of offense, defense. He can recruit at a high level. And with the transfer portal, it's not just, obviously everybody knows it's not traditional high school anymore. Transfer portal, he brings in kids. Like this year, he's relying on a veteran like Miles Kelly. So he can do all 3 facets. He can coach offense, he can coach defense, and he can recruit high school kids, traditional, and through the portal. He knows how to build a team. Indiana, and in today's day and age, where you can flip a roster just like that, Bruce Pearl has shown he can come in, he can command the program, and he can immediately make an impact. Now, the reasons why you potentially wouldn't hire Bruce Pearl is if you're Scott Dolson or you're the administration in Indiana and you have any worries about former violations, because if you remember, Bruce's time at Tennessee came to an end because of a violation. He was hit with a 5-year show clause. That's why he went into doing television before getting the Auburn job. That would be one of the only hangups. But ever since he's had that one violation, ever since then, he's been good to go. No issues at Auburn. You look at, he signed a contract extension for 8 years back in, I think it was 2022. So he has his current contract running through 2030. We don't know. I don't know the official details of what a buyout would cost, but say that you want Bruce Pearl. Bruce Pearl wants to come to you. I think it would cost anywhere between $6 and $10 million. Indiana has money, especially in today's NIL, and then there's going to be revenue sharing if that still goes through. Indiana has money. That is a relatively low buyout, considering if you're talking about Kentucky last season, if they were to fire Calipari, it was going to owe him like $40 million. So 6 to 10 is fairly comfortable in a lot of ways. Bruce Pearl would be one of those 3 calls. The other 2 would be Chris Beard. And I know he's the kind of the name on everybody's tongue at IU. Bob Knight disciple, spent a long time being an assistant with Bob Knight during his Texas Tech days. Coached 1 year at Arkansas Little Rock, was really good there. has not had a losing season as a coach, made that same Final Four we just talked about Bruce Pearl's team. Not only did Chris Beard lead Texas Tech to the Final Four, he led them all the way to a national title game appearance against the eventual winners, Virginia, and played them really good. He came within 40 minutes of being a national championship coach himself. He's won everywhere. Arkansas Little Rock, Texas Tech, Texas in the brief amount before he got fired, let go, and then now at Ole Miss. Ole Miss, extremely hard to win at, and especially in today's SEC, Chris Beard has a really good team. He is a program builder. The dude knows how to coach. He knows how to win. And again, if you're kind of looking for sentimental, I know Indiana fans love Bob Knight, as they should. That is a Bob Knight disciple. His teams play hard. They get after you. Everything that Indiana loved about their program under Bob Knight, Chris Beard, being that disciple, embodies all that. And he obviously continues to reference Bob Knight. Even just this last game where they blew out Kentucky, he'd reference Bob Knight quotes in that. Again, if you're looking for something, though, that potential holdup, we know what happened there at Texas. He only spent 1 year. What happened there, why he got let go early in the year 2 of his tenure there. Charges were dropped. Everything's in the clear now, but I guess from a morality standpoint, if you don't want to have that associated with your program, that would be the hang up. But if we're talking just X's and O's coaching, he has shown he can recruit. He's shown he can hit the transfer portal and blend in talent that fits his system well. Chris Beard is an A+ hire from all of those standpoints. But if you're held up on the morality end of it, completely understand. But Chris Beard, I would make the phone call. I would absolutely make the phone call. And the other one, another Indiana favorite, an Indiana born and raised guy, Dusty May. Dusty made a Final Four a few years ago with FAU and won the more improbable, upset-ridden runs all the way to a Final Four. He grew up in that area near Bloomington, played high school basketball in the state of Indiana, was on the staff at IU. Like, he has connections to Indiana through and through. The problem is he's in year 1 at Michigan, just signed the contract with Michigan. So he's locked in. Obviously, I know that doesn't mean you can't get out of contracts. We're not saying that. But would he want to abandon ship in year number 1? It's something you'd have to think about. Now, if you're Dusty May, why would you want to leave? Well, maybe you want to come back home. You grew up around Indiana. You went to IU. Maybe you just want to come back home, and it's always been your dream to take over the Hoosiers. So it's easier to forget maybe about Michigan even after 1 year for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to come back and take over your hometown program and see if you can't be the guy to get them back to the promised land. And the other thing with Michigan, high academic standards, he's going to have to deal with it every year of potentially bringing guys in from the portal from other schools and dealing with maybe them getting denied access, like Caleb Love. Like Juwan Howard had to deal with this last year with Caleb Love. Tried to get him in. He was set to go to Michigan, and he couldn't get in. They denied him because of grades, transcripts, and all that. Dusty Mays is going to have to deal with that same thing. So Indiana, it's a little bit more easy to get in. So there are factors if you're Dusty May and you're Indiana that makes you feel good about him wanting to come back home. Again, we don't know what Dusty wants. Maybe he loves life in Ann Arbor. We just had him on the show. Didn't ask him none of that. None of my business. Would not do that to him. But I'm speculating because he's a hot name for this, for all the things I just talked about. And I think he has to be one of those top tier calls because he can coach. Look what he's doing in Michigan, program that the last year or so, Juwan Howard kind of slipped a little bit, and he's got them back right in the big thick of the Big Ten race. They're probably going to finish top 4 this year. We'll get a double bye. They're for sure NCAA tournament team. And depending on how everything goes, could be a factor to make a run. So he can coach. What he did at FAU, what he's doing now at Michigan. You bring him back to Indiana, who knows what IU basketball means more than one of your own. So I think that's kind of tier 1, who you would have. If I'm Scott Dolson, the AD at Indiana, if I'm the board of trustees and directors in Indiana, those are my top 3 candidates. Bruce Pearl, Chris Beard, Dusty May. Make them tell you no for sure before you move on to anybody else. Tier 2, this isn't like realistic. This is who I've gathered from Indiana fans. These are more, we'll call them the dream tier. If for some random reason that you could get one of these guys to come over to Bloomington, bring them out of retirement, bring them back from the NBA, I think this would be your dream tier list. Again, not realistic, but I want to add it just because from the Indiana people I've talked to, these are the three names that I continually get. Figured it'd be fun to bring them up. Brad Stevens, he's always been on the list. He's been on the list for ever since he left Butler to coach the Boston Celtics. There's always kind of been this pipe dream. Another Indiana kid, coached the Butler, made back-to-back national championship game appearances, yada, yada, yada. There's always been this pipe dream that he would come back home, so to speak, and be the head coach of Indiana. I don't think he's ever coming back to college. He's got a cush job, just won an NBA championship with the Boston Celtics as an executive. Why would he want to deal with this madness of modern college basketball if he was kind of ready to get out of the old college basketball system? But you can dream, right? And if you were talking about dream candidates, Brad Stevens has got to be number one. The other two, if you get Jay Wright, somehow get him to leave that cush job at CBS and announcing games and commentating to come back and be your coach, Jay Wright would be a home run, of course. Now, it would be short-term because the age and everything. But I think, again, we'll talk about some of these others. You would trade short-term success if you're IU to get the ball rolling so he can maybe pass it off, raise the profile again. But, again, these are dream candidates. And then Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan won 2 national championships prior to UConn winning last year and being the first team to go back-to-back since Florida. Florida was the last team to do it. Billy Donovan led Florida teams, multiple Final Fours, multiple second weekend appearances, number 1 seeds, the whole works. He's been out of college a long time. The game has completely changed. But he did at least think about the idea of going to Kentucky this last offseason. He at least thought about it. So if he thought about that, maybe he's ready to get back to college and get out of the NBA life. But Billy Donovan would be obviously a big-time hire if you're Indiana. Again, those are dream candidates. Let's go to some more realistic. If you don't get one of the tier 1 that I mentioned, and Bruce Pearl, Chris Beard, Dusty May, there's a handful of kind of more realistic targets, I think. And we'll begin with Florida's Todd Golden. Led San Francisco to an NCAA tournament, kind of turn that program around that had really struggled for a long time. Makes the jump to Florida, and you look at the Gators that make the NCAA tournament last year. He struggled year 1. Now, the adjustment from San Francisco to Florida really struggled, needed to get his feet wet in a power conference, kind of figure out how to recruit there. But since then, he has figured out. They made the NCAA tournament last year. Extremely fun offense. The one thing about Todd Golden teams is you're going to have multiple guards, multiple scoring guards, multiple ball handling guards. You're going to play fast. You're going to play free. It'll be an entertaining brand of basketball that I know Indiana fans will enjoy, especially considering their shooting woes here in recent years. Todd Golden would bring in shooters. He would bring in a fast, fun style basketball that the Big Ten really doesn't see a whole lot, to be completely honest. The other thing, they will be tough. He will bring in big kids, dudes that'll hit the glass. Todd Golden, now again, and he's young. Let me throw in that caveat. He's young. So theoretically, let's say you did get Todd Golden, he's a dude that potentially could be there 20 years, 15, 20 years, and really win at Indiana. With their NIL money, he would really win at Indiana because he is a good, young, up-and-coming head coach. I don't even know if you want to call him up-and-coming anymore because he's there. You look what he's doing with Florida right now. Top 10 basically most of the year already. Has a real chance of making a Final Four behind that fun brand basketball and the guards he's got. Now imagine Indiana folks, him doing that for your program. Again, he kind of involved in a little controversy this year, actually. Just a few months ago. He's been cleared of all that. So you kind of wash your hands of that. But again, maybe a morality standpoint, it all depends on how you feel about it, and more importantly, how Scott Dolson, the Indiana Board of Trustees and Board of Directors feel about it. But Todd Golden would be an amazing hire. I don't know if he would leave Florida, but I think there's a chance that with the right amount of money and fan base behind him, being a dominant basketball school historically, I think you could have a good chance of getting him at the very least, at least making him think about it. TJ Otzelberger at Iowa State. Again, I don't know Otzelberger's feelings. He seems pretty happy out there at Iowa State. But you talk about a guy who won a lot in 3 years at South Dakota State, spent 2 years at UNLV, was okay, and then goes to Iowa State and is just won. 22-13 in year one, 19-14 in 2023, so took a little downgrade. But he looked himself in the mirror last year, figured out that they have to be able to score the ball because defensively, look at his 4 years so far at Iowa State. 2022, 5th. 2023, 8th. Last year, the number one ranked defense according to KenPom and metrically. And then this year, they're 7th. But the difference is he's figured out that you need scoring guards. So he's constantly evolving and changing his style. And I think he'll continue to do that, whether he's at Iowa State or if he did come to IU. That's a dude who is continually learning, understanding the assignment at a higher program and at a higher level than what UNLV and South Dakota State presented him. And he's relatively young, will continue to get better. His teams play extremely hard. They defend their ass off, which I know Indiana folks love. And he is figuring out how to run better offense and bringing the type of talent you need like that to score at a higher level. I think his style would mesh well with Indiana and Indiana fans. He would always have them the conversation. But again, I don't know his status at Iowa State. But again, if Indiana comes calling, throws the bag at him, I think he'd at least have a conversation. I'm going to rapid fire a couple names here that I also think should be under consideration, that if you made the phone call, that Indiana would have a high likelihood of securing. Richard Pitino. I know there'll be Indiana fans that scoff at that idea. Yes, did he struggle and end up getting fired at Minnesota? Yeah, he did. But you look at his time at Minnesota too. He had multiple 21 years, 25-13 in year one, 24-10 in 2017, where they made the NCAA tournament, 22-14 in 2019, and then followed up by some losing seasons, ultimately cost his job. Don't look, he made 2 NCAA tournaments in Minnesota, a program that doesn't make a whole lot of NCAA tournaments. Keep that in mind. Made a second round in 2019. He learns from that, goes to New Mexico, and he's been really good at New Mexico. Struggled year one, only going 13-19, but since 22-12, 26-10 last year, made the NCAA tournament. They're 19-4, projected at this point to win the Mountain West Conference, get over 20 wins again, maybe even 25, and has a team that could be a threat to win a game or two, and all of a sudden be in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. He's a player's coach. They play fun basketball. They play high tempo. It's an entertaining brand. He's obviously learned from his mistakes at Minnesota that cost him his job. He's figured out at New Mexico. I think he could take that experience at New Mexico, bring it all with him to Indiana, a conference that he's familiar with, bring that fun, entertaining brand, bring the fact that he can recruit now with a bigger budget again in Indiana, get the players he wants to fit his system. And I think Richard Pitino would do really well at Indiana. Would he ever make a Final Four? We don't know. But I can guarantee you this, his teams would be more fun than what you've seen the last couple of years. I could promise you that. I think Richard Pitino would be on my list of, because if Indiana does it, somebody will. A Power 5 conference in the next year or two will make a call to him and bring him in. And imagine he goes to another Big Ten team and just kills you when maybe you could have made the phone call. Chris Mack, maybe not as realistic, but I also think he would listen. Spent time at Louisville, early part of Louisville tenure, went really well. Had him number one, and then post-COVID, things went bad. He gets fired. He's at Charleston now. He's killing it at Charleston. He killed it prior to Louisville at Xavier, making multiple NCAA tournaments, making deep runs. The dude can coach, familiar with this area, familiar with the Midwest, can coach them up. His teams play extremely hard. They defend. Chris Mack, although maybe not the most sexy pick, I think if Indiana could land a Chris Mack, would stabilize the program. And I think year in and year out, maybe you don't always make a deep run, but there'll be years that you do where you make a second weekend. And I think you'll always be in the mix, not only in the Big Ten, but to make a run in the NCAA tournament. Mick Cronin, I think, is a realistic option. Now, personally, I'm not a huge fan of his style of basketball, but it works. He has been successful in every stop he's had so far. He was really good at Cincinnati. He was really good prior to that for 3 years at Murray State that landed him the Cincinnati job. He's a Rick Pitino guy, spent time at Pitino or with Pitino in his early days at Louisville, so he has that connection. The Murray State Cincinnati, so he knows the Midwest, kind of knows this Bloomington area. Brought kids into Cincinnati. He's went out to UCLA. He has brought in really good talent despite having good years sometimes, some struggle years. Remember, he made it all the way to the Final Four and came within a half-court shot from Gonzaga. Maybe goes to the national title game in 2021. Made 2 Sweet 16s after that. Struggled last year. Did not make tournament, but they're 17-6 in the Big Ten, mind you. And his style fits the Big Ten perfectly. It's not flashy. They play slow tempo. It's really a half-court game, but they play incredible defense. His teams are always incredibly tough. And it's not that they can't shoot, but it's just they have limited opportunities. But again, Mick Cronin, I think, make the phone call. Maybe, I don't know if he's like kind of the LA guy. He's been out there for, this is the 7th year now. Or I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th year. I'm sorry, 6th year. And I think if he had the opportunity to come back to these parts, I think that suits him better. And I think it's a realistic possibility. I could totally see Indiana calling Mick Cronin and bringing him back to the Midwest. And look, he would be good. Another kind of guy like Chris Mack that would stabilize. Not the most sexy pick, would not be my number 1, number 2, or number 3. That's why he's kind of in this other tier. But if you got Mick Cronin as kind of for Indiana fans, a consolation prize, look, you're going to win games and you're going to be incredibly tough. And maybe the occasional year you can make a deep run to a Final Four. At this point, it's all about stabilizing for Indiana. Now, I've got one name and another tier before I kind of give you my pick on who I think Indiana should hire. And that being, I'll call it the high risk, high reward. His name's floating around, as it should be, because somebody's going to snatch this dude up. He's in year 1 at Drake. They're 21-2. They're going to probably make the NCAA tournament as the winners of the Missouri Valley Conference. And if you're not familiar with Ben McCollum and you only know him and you look at Drake and be like, oh, he's only got 1 year of D1 experience, like, that's not enough, right? That's not enough. Well, he had a powerhouse in Division II prior. He was at Northwest Missouri State from 2009 until this most recent year. And listen to this, 2011-12. NCAA Division II first round. 13-14, Sweet 16. 14-15, Sweet 16. 15-16, Sweet 16. 16-17, national champion. 17-18, first round. 18-19, national champion. The following year was the COVID year, so it was canceled. The next 2 years, national champion. 2022-23, second round. And then last year, it made it to Sweet 16. He won 4 national championships in that time period of 15 seasons, multiple Sweet 16s. The dude can coach, and if you watch his Drake teams play incredibly entertaining basketball. He's going to be snatched up by somebody. Now, again, would he be the sexy hire? No, I've already talked to Indiana fans. He would not be the sexy hire. But if your kind of consolation prize was getting Ben McCollum, give him time to figure out kind of how to recruit at a higher level and the talent that's needed to compete at Indiana and kind of in the Big Ten. And with a couple seasons, he's going to have maybe even year 1. I'm not saying it couldn't happen year 1. We've talked about transfer portal and all that. He could get them up and going. But you're going to have a fun style with a coach who's a proven winner. And for those who downplay D2, look at some of the top teams in the country, see where their players are coming from. Division II has got multiple D1 players, especially at these higher ranked teams like a Northwest Missouri State. I mean, look at Drake. He brought dudes with him to Drake from that Northwest Missouri State team. Division II is really high level basketball anymore. Give him time. If your consolation prize was Ben McCollum and you could get him, I think long-term, that is a really good hire because somebody is going to hire that dude sooner rather than later. And if Indiana ends up with him, I think that's a really good hire long-term. Now, the question being, we've talked about all these people in almost 30 minutes, way longer than I expected, but who should Indiana hire? list off a bunch of names here. My personal opinion, the next coach of Indiana should be Chris Beard. Bob Knight disciple, wins everywhere, never had a losing record as a head coach in Division I. His teams play incredibly hard. They defend, they rebound. He runs kind of that motion offense that Indiana fans grew up with Bob Knight to love so much. I think he would embrace Indiana, not only because being the Bob Knight disciple, which would help retain a lot of kind of those old school Indiana players, keep the alumni happy and keep them rolling in. But it's I think he understands that it's Indiana and they need to be back amongst the elite of college basketball. To me, the next coach of Indiana should be Chris Beard. If it's not Chris Beard, I think it's got to be Dusty May. Bruce Pearl would be awesome. I just don't know if he would leave Auburn, especially in that league. He's got things rolling with less pressure. I think Chris Beard would embrace all of this, know he's walking into kind of the fishbowl or the Shark Tank, however you want to look at that analogy-wise, and I think he would kill it at Indiana University. So my personal opinion, this time next year, I think they go all out for Chris Beard, and I think we're sitting here next year talking about Indiana being led by Chris Beard. My personal opinion, I have no idea what Indiana plans on doing. I have no idea what Scott Dolson, their AD, wants to do, but I know they've got money. You give Beard big-time NIL, more than what he's getting at Ole Miss. Let him go get the players he wants. He could turn this thing around immediately. So that's my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in this video. Drop your comments below. We'll get to them. And leave a like, follow, share, subscribe, all that. Let me know what you guys think. But I think Chris Beard should be the next head coach at Indiana University, and I think that would be a home run hire.